"Don't come tonight. My ex is here and things are complicated," Ryan texted me. I typed back 2 letters. Okay. Then I grabbed my keys, locked my apartment door, and drove straight to his house anyway. Because what Ryan didn't know was that I had already seen everything. Every lie, every conversation, every laugh he had at my expense. And that night, I wasn't going there to cry. I was going there because I was finally done pretending I didn't know. My name is Claire Bennett, and I'm 31 years old. I work as a freelance content writer and brand strategist. I build other people's voices for a living. I help companies tell their stories in a way that makes people actually believe them. The irony of that is not lost on me now. I grew up in a regular household. My parents weren't rich, but they were honest. My dad worked double shifts at a logistics company. My mom was a school librarian. Nobody handed us anything, and that made me practical. I don't lean on people easily. I figure things out. I push through. And in relationships, I'm the kind of person who gives everything quietly. I don't make demands. I don't throw ultimatums. I believe in people, sometimes well past the point where I should. Ryan Cole came into my life 2 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. He was confident without being loud about it. He had this way of listening to you like you were the only person in the room. He talked about building something meaningful, about wanting a real partner, not just someone to fill a role. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but he was convincing. After a few months, I was all in. I'm not going to pretend I was some naive girl who didn't see the signs. I saw them. I just chose to explain them away. Late replies became busy weeks. Canceled plans became bad timing. Vague answers became he's just private. And then that text arrived, and something inside me stopped making excuses. If you've ever been in a relationship where you felt like the backup plan, where you were present but never quite chosen, you already know this feeling. That quiet confusion of loving someone who keeps you close but never fully lets you in. If that hits home, subscribe. This community exists because too many of us stay silent when we deserve to be heard. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Trust me, what happened that night changed everything, and not just for Ryan. Like this video if you've ever trusted someone who made you feel like it was your fault for trusting them. The text came in on a Thursday night. I had just finished a long client call and was heating up leftovers when my phone buzzed. Ryan's name on the screen. "Don't come tonight. My ex is here. We're just talking things through." I stood in my kitchen reading it 3 times. Ryan had told me about his ex, Natalie, exactly 4 times over the course of our relationship. Each time, the story was the same. She was drama. She was manipulative. She was completely out of his life. He said it with such certainty that I never questioned it. Why would I? I trusted him. I called him. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey," he said, like nothing unusual was happening. "What does talking things through mean?" I asked. "Why are you making this weird?" His voice shifted. Not angry, just flat, like he was tired of a conversation we hadn't even started. "I'm not making it weird. I'm asking a normal question." "Claire," he exhaled, "you do this. You overthink everything and turn it into something it's not." That sentence landed differently than he probably intended, because it wasn't the first time I'd heard a version of it. I said, "Okay," and hung up. I stood at my kitchen counter for maybe 4 minutes. Then I put on my jacket, grabbed my keys, and drove across town to his apartment. I parked half a block down the street. I could hear music from outside, not just 2 people talking, a gathering. I walked closer. Through the front window, I could see Ryan. He was laughing, drink in hand, standing next to a woman I recognized from his old social media photos, Natalie. She was leaning into him, and he wasn't leaning away. There were other people there too, 6 or 7, all comfortable, like this was a regular Friday night. Then I heard it through the side window, someone's voice carrying over the music. "So Claire still thinks you're dating her?" Ryan laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a real one. "Yeah, but she'll figure it out eventually." The air went out of me completely. He wasn't just hiding something, he was entertaining his friends with it. I stood on that sidewalk and made myself stay still. My first instinct was to walk through that door. My second instinct was to call him right then and let him hear my voice shake. I did neither. I took out my phone and recorded what I could hear from the window. Then I walked back to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and breathed. What I felt in that moment wasn't what I expected. It wasn't just hurt, it was clarity, sharp and cold, like stepping outside in January. I had been here before, in smaller versions of this moment, and I had always chosen to ignore what I was seeing. Not this time. I thought back to a conversation 3 months earlier. Ryan had casually mentioned that Natalie had texted him. I hadn't pried. I just said, "You told me she was out of your life." He looked at me with this expression, patient and slightly weary, like I was a child misunderstanding something simple. "She reached out. I didn't. There's a difference. And the fact that you can't see that tells me you have an insecurity problem, Claire, not me." I apologized. I actually apologized for asking a reasonable question about a woman he had described to me as manipulative and dramatic. 2 months before that, Ryan had asked me to help him with a pitch deck. He was trying to land a small sponsorship deal for a content project he was starting. I spent an entire weekend on it. The design, the copy, the structure, all of it. I was good at that kind of work. It was literally what I did for clients. He got the deal. I was happy for him. Then at a casual dinner with some of his friends, I heard him tell the story of landing the pitch. He talked about how Natalie had helped him shape the whole thing, how she had this great eye for presentation, how he couldn't have done it without her feedback. I sat at that table and said nothing. Everyone at that dinner knew Ryan, and I was barely an afterthought. When I said something funny, the conversation moved on before anyone reacted. When I mentioned my own work, Ryan smiled politely and redirected to something else. At one point, he said in front of everyone, "Claire's sweet. She worries too much though. She's basically my personal anxiety coach." Everyone laughed. I smiled, and I sat with it quietly, the way I always did. Now, sitting alone in my car outside his apartment, I was finally ready to stop sitting with it quietly. What Ryan didn't know, what he had never bothered to ask about, was that my work had a reach he would have found useful if he had paid any attention. About 18 months ago, I started a professional blog under a pen name. I called it The Copy Table. It started as a space for me to share writing techniques and brand strategy advice. It grew faster than I expected. Newsletters, templates, teardowns of brand campaigns, designers, copywriters, small business owners, they all started following along. By the time of that night outside Ryan's window, The Copy Table had over 40,000 monthly readers. Agencies reached out through it. Brands asked for consulting calls. A few had hired me for full projects directly through the platform. Ryan mentioned it once. Someone had shared one of my posts in a mutual group chat, not knowing I wrote it. Ryan glanced at it and said, "This is fine, but kind of surface level advice." He scrolled past it without interest. He never knew. He also never knew that two people in his own professional circle followed The Copy Table for content strategy guidance. One of them had emailed the blog asking for advice on how to position a small media brand. That brand happened to be adjacent to the project Ryan was launching. I thought about all of this as I drove home. I called Sophie when I got back to my apartment. Sophie Park had been my closest friend since we were both 17, working summer jobs at the same bookshop. The place always smelled like old paper and that particular dust that accumulates in quiet spaces. Sophie and I used to joke that we'd absorbed enough wisdom just from being surrounded by all those books. She answered on the first ring. "Talk to me," she said. I told her everything. The text, the drive, the window, the recording, the laugh. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Claire, you don't need to blow anything up. You just need the truth to be visible." That sentence settled into me. We stayed on the phone for 2 hours that night, going through everything I had. My design files from the pitch deck, time-stamped drafts on my laptop, email threads where Ryan had sent me raw notes and I had transformed them into something polished. Photos of him posting that work online and accepting credit for it without mentioning me once. The recording from outside the window. Sophie had always been careful, methodical. Where I tend to feel first and think second, she goes the other direction. She said, "Whatever you decide to do, don't do it angry, do it clean." I spent the next 4 days being clean about it. Ryan acted normal during that time. He texted me the morning after, asking if I wanted to get dinner later that week. No explanation, no acknowledgement, just business as usual. I replied that I was busy. He didn't push. Meanwhile, he was posting on social media pictures from that Thursday night, group photos, smiling, captioned with things like, "Good people, good energy." Natalie was in one of them. He looked like a man who had no idea anything was coming. I watched his professional accounts too. He was positioning himself as a rising voice in content and digital strategy, using vocabulary I recognized, framing I had helped him develop over months of conversations, where he'd run ideas by me and I'd quietly shaped them into something coherent. On the 5th day, I opened my blog's backend and started writing. The post was titled, "When Someone Builds Their Career Using Your Work." I didn't use Ryan's name. I didn't need to. I wrote about the experience clearly and with specific detail. I included what collaboration actually looked like. I uploaded screenshots of original drafts with timestamps. I attached the audio clip of what I had heard through that window, edited only to remove background noise. I explained, in plain language, what it feels like to invest your expertise in someone and watch them accept credit for it in rooms you aren't invited into. I published it on a Tuesday morning. By noon, it had more shares than anything I had ever posted. By evening, people in Ryan's professional network were talking about it. The details were specific enough that several of them recognized a pitch deck. One person publicly asked Ryan if the post was about him. He replied vaguely, saying it was all a misunderstanding and that he'd address it privately. He did not address it privately. He called me. "Claire, why would you do this?" His voice was tighter than I had ever heard it. Not angry, scared. I let a beat of silence go by before I answered. "Ryan," I said, "you already did this. I just made it visible." He tried to explain. He said he would have credited me eventually. He said things had gotten complicated with Natalie. He said I didn't understand the full picture. I told him I understood it perfectly. Then I told him I had seen enough. That evening, I published a follow-up post, short, 1 paragraph. I revealed that I was the writer behind The Copy Table and included a link to my professional portfolio. I didn't frame it as revenge. revenge, I framed it as context. The response was immediate. Sophie called me an hour later and just said it worked. Within a week, 2 of Ryan's business partners had quietly stepped back from a collaboration they had been planning with him. His account lost followers. A brand that had been in early talks with him sent a very polite email saying they were moving in a different direction, and 3 agencies reached out to me directly for consulting work, 2 of whom found me through the blog, and 1 who said a colleague had forwarded my portfolio that week. I blocked Ryan's number after he sent a long text attempting a formal apology that was mostly about the damage to his reputation. I didn't respond. Sophie came over that weekend with food she had cooked herself. We sat in my apartment and ate and talked for hours. At one point, she looked at me and said, "You're lighter. You look like yourself again." She wasn't wrong. The relationship had cost me something I hadn't fully named until I was out of it. Not just time or energy, but that particular kind of confidence that comes from being seen accurately. Ryan had never seen me accurately. He had seen what was useful and looked past the rest. Losing that relationship didn't hurt the way I thought it would. What hurt, and still does in a quieter way, was realizing how long I had accepted being treated like a background character in a story I was largely writing. But I was done being quiet about it, and the moment I stopped, things changed. The copy table kept growing. I started writing under my real name. My client list expanded. I started saying yes to opportunities I had been putting off for months, calls I hadn't made, pitches I hadn't sent, because some part of me had been waiting for someone else to believe in my work before I fully did myself. I didn't need that anymore. Here's what I know now. The most important thing I did that night wasn't the post, it wasn't the recording, it wasn't even the drive across town. It was the decision, sitting alone in that car in the dark, to stop explaining what I already knew. Sometimes the most powerful thing isn't confrontation, it isn't drama or destruction, it's simply letting the truth be seen and trusting that people will know what to do with it. That's what I did, and I have not regretted it for one single day since. If you've ever been made to feel like you were the backup plan, the quiet support, the one who gives and gives while someone else accepts the credit, I want you to know something. You are not invisible. Your work matters. Your instincts are not dramatic, and you deserve to be in a room where people already know your name. Share your story in the comments. I mean it. I read every one. Subscribe if this community feels like a place you want to be. And if this story hit you somewhere real, click hype. Help it reach someone else who needs to hear it, because the truth always deserves an audience. Did this story stay with you? Leave a comment and let me know. Like the video, click hype, and share it if you think someone in your life needs to hear this today. Your support helps this community grow.